So yes, up next, we have a keynote presentation from Mr. Nigel Hawthorn, the cloud and privacy spokesperson for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa from McAfee. And McAfee is one of our sponsors as well. So yes, Nigel, so the stage is yours.
Okay, can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes, very clear, and yes, the screen is perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about was trying to help you discuss cloud risks with the rest of your organization. I was here all day yesterday and today, and we've shared a lot of information already, and I don't want to repeat some of the things that you've heard. And so I'm going to try and dive straight into how do you talk to the rest of your organization and get them to understand the issues that you're dealing with, honestly get budget to be able to address cloud risk, and how can you get them on board when maybe they're talking a slightly different language than you are. If you're in IT, you need to talk to governance, risk, and compliance. And unfortunately, I think that quite often it's really difficult to try to explain the issues that you're here to deal with. We talked a lot about making sure that configurations are correct, that we're looking at the cloud providers that we're using and making sure that they've got all of the security measures in place that they need to put there. But is there more than that? And I just want to use a quick example of a film, The Sixth Sense. Don't know if you've seen this, but if you have, you may remember the little boy there who said, "I see dead people, but they don't know they're dead." I think in the IT world and in the business world, I see siloed people, but they don't know they're siloed. We really need to help the rest of our colleagues understand the risks that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And that means talking in their language and telling them perhaps some simple things, which is you can go out and buy a car. You can buy a car that is well designed, that has airbags and seat belts and so on, but you can still drive it at 100 miles an hour into a wall. And that's the same, I think, with cloud, that you can buy the most secure cloud service that you can. And there's lots of people that we will trust to provide us with secure systems, but they can still be used in an insecure way. And if I quote from Gartner, you can see here that they say 99% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. That's you, that's me, that's our employees, that's our DevOps team forgetting to turn on the security measures in AWS. It's also users often not understanding what they have got in front of them, not understanding the power of the cloud. We all know stories of people who've emailed the wrong person. Well, the same thing can happen in the cloud as well. I've put this file on OneDrive and then I shared it with someone, but instead of just giving it to them, I gave them an open link and they forwarded it on to someone else. Instead of sharing a file, I shared a whole folder. I sent it to people that I shouldn't have done, etc., etc. So I think while we as IT security professionals and IT professionals are often worried about the configuration of the systems and which systems we're using, we've also got to think about the users. And there's lots of articles about this, and as you can see, here's one: human error is causing issues during the pandemic. So many of us are working from home, are implementing BYOD for the first time. You know, what is the rule for that? Is it okay? Here I've got a laptop, it belongs to the company. The company allow me to download sensitive data onto that laptop. I've also got my phone next to me. That's my phone, it belongs to me. Should the rules be different for my phone? Should they say, well, yes, you can access the corporate data on my phone, but you can't download it to the phone because I then lose control? We can help you with this. I'm not here to sell you on McAfee systems, but in the panel session earlier, one of the speakers, Mohammed, I think it was, who said, we need to look at CASB technology. CASB technology, Cloud Access Security Brokers, is there to try to make sure that the security that you're used to in email and on premises can be migrated to the cloud. And of course, my colleagues and myself can talk to you afterwards about the technology. But what I want to talk about is how you get everyone else on board. And here's my little example. I wrote a white paper called the 360-degree shared responsibility model, realizing that lots of other shared responsibility models were written just for IT people. And they were written by people who wanted to say, these are all the things that we do, and then very quickly, everything else is your fault. For me, the interesting bit is everything else. And let's look at how I've presented this often to legal people, because I've spoken to legal people at events like this who've said to me, oh, if there's a cloud problem, we'll just sue the cloud provider. That's a complete misunderstanding of the problem. And I said to them, have you ever rented a car? And they said, well, yeah. I said, look, when you rent a car, there's a shared responsibility. Let's go through it and then compare that to the cloud. With a car, you need it to be built well. You don't want it to fall apart at the first corner. Look, you've got seat belts, but it's the responsibility of the driver to put the seat belt on. So a shared responsibility between manufacturer and driver. And they go, okay, that makes sense. What else is there? Well, servicing brakes and tires when it comes out of the factory, responsibility of the manufacturer. A year later, the responsibility of the rental company to ensure that it's up to date. Okay, yeah, I understand that right now. There's 3 groups of people. What else have you got? Seatbelts for passengers. Manufacturer, driver. Hey kids, put your seatbelts on. Passengers. Maybe passengers are like users in an IT world. Fuel, oil, water, responsibility of the rental company. When you pick it up, make sure it's full. Your responsibility as driver as you drive it around. Insurance is always included in your contract. But of course, the rental company will happily sell you collision damage waiver and add-on insurance. Whose responsibility is that? Not quite the driver. This time it's the renter. Now, maybe the renter, the legal person signing the contract, is similar to governance, risk and compliance, or legal or finance when they're signing the contract with your cloud service provider. And all of this is happening before you put in your bags and you start driving it. It's understood. Actually, we don't even think about it. We just put down our credit card, pick up the keys and drive off and come back. The important thing about this model, and let's remember, I'm not teaching you, but I'm talking to you about how you talk internally, is to share with your internal team that you need to address every row. You can't miss one and say, well, everything else was okay, but I just missed that little thing. Well, let's look at cloud, and it's the same idea, the same concept. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people talk about, can I use this cloud provider? What's their security measures? Where's their data center? Have they got security of the infrastructure and so on? And that's okay. It's a start, but it is only the start. It's only the beginning. Then you've got to think, well, what features do they have to configure the cloud? And those features and how I configure them are actually my responsibility. So DevOps, DevSecOps, if you've got one. IT security, you've got to make sure that you've set up the features correctly. Then what about the data that you're putting in there? Data classification. Well, that's only going to be the responsibility of the enterprise. Only the enterprise knows what is sensitive data. And then you've got users and what users might do. And unfortunately, our users can very often, as I explained earlier, use secure systems in an insecure way without realizing it. And what we've seen in the last year, of course, is enormous growth. Here we are using Zoom, massive growth in Teams, for instance, and we could be sharing in Teams all sorts of information. So let's use Teams as a quick example. It's just one application of something like 30,000 different cloud applications. I looked at the statistics for June last year of all of our Envision Cloud customers worldwide. And what we saw, these are average numbers. We had an average of 100,000 team meetings in 1 month. 6,500 new members added to Teams. Can you manage that? Are all the members the right members? I was once added to a team that was actually for a different department. Maybe they thought my name was similar to somebody else's, and then I was removed from that team. But in that short amount of time, could I have seen some information that I shouldn't have? Let's also remember Teams can be used for external users. And we see on average about 3,000 external guests invited to a team every month. That's one every 5 minutes. Are those the external guests you want? Have you set up, we trust these domains, but not these domains? You can do that. You can do that either in Teams or with a CASB product. What else? We see third-party applications added to Teams. So there's Polly, for instance, a polling app where we can add information to Teams. But data starts moving now from Teams, which maybe you trust, to Polly, which maybe you don't trust. So how do you know once you start opening up the cloud that it's being used in an effective way? And if you don't use Teams yourself, here's me with a picture of different things that I could share. I could share applications in Teams, but I could also share my screen. If I shared my screen and didn't turn off email, what if an email appears on the top of my screen and then it's been shared with everybody I'm in the team with, and that says something confidential? So we've got to realize that actually users need help, and they need to be educated on how to use these applications. And we also need to put in guardrails. We need to put in systems that will try to make things secure. You can see on your screen at the moment the top 10 Teams threats overview. I can never say that. I also wrote a paper on Teams, and you can download that. I'll show you, I'll share the links with you afterwards, that talks about some of those threats. And many of them can be addressed with technology, but not technology only. We do need to educate our users about what's appropriate and what isn't, who to share information with, etc. So what we need to do, firstly, is find out what services people are using and what security modes they have. And some of this was talked about earlier. You know, you can't say this cloud is always bad, this cloud is always good. You've got to look at the attributes of those clouds and you decide what's appropriate for you. So for instance, you can see here, 9% of cloud services that we know about encrypt data at rest. Maybe a better thing will be encrypting data in transit, because if people are using shared Wi-Fi, maybe you need that data to be encrypted in transit. And you probably need to make a decision that says, is encrypted in transit an important attribute for us? Do we want to block those cloud services that don't encrypt data in transit? And so the good news is some of these controls can be very positive. You look at the bottom three here, it's about integration with your corporate system. So I use Trello, for example. It's a system to do task management, and you can share it with employees. But before getting into Trello, I have to go through the corporate McAfee single sign-on service. McAfee know I'm using Trello. If I was to leave the company tomorrow, my access to Trello would be removed. So is that the same in your organization? Have you made sure that every cloud service that departments are using are safe and secure and are being integrated with your corporate system? Because if not, when an employee leaves, maybe they'll take some data with them. So this is a list of about 70 or so different attributes. And I'm not going to go through them all. We certainly don't have the time. But this is the sort of information we at McAfee can give you about all the different cloud services. You can see the likely risks for data or user or the service or business or legal. Some websites, for instance, will say that they own all of the data that's uploaded. Some of them will have cross-site scripting problems. Some of them will perhaps have very few compliance certifications. Some of them will have PCI, for instance. PCI was mentioned earlier. If you need to make sure that you support PCI, you also need to make sure that your cloud service provider supports PCI as well. So you need to know what's going on the shadow cloud, but you also need to control, probably, actually more importantly, those services you do trust. Because, as I said earlier, they can be used in an insecure way. So Microsoft 365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Box, all of those services, and of course, AWS or Azure for your own applications, are you sure they're being used in a secure way? And so I'm not going to go through this slide, but this is part of a zero trust presentation that I give. And it's looking at what might a single user do on a typical day. And every action they take, you need to look at, is this action okay? You know, is Nigel's activity right now of sharing this file something that we should run DLP before the file gets shared, even if it's through a cloud service? is Nigel allowed to send this file by email? I'm going to share this presentation with all of you afterwards if you want a copy. I've got no problem, but it's probably about 40 megabytes. So I bet you I can't email it to most of you because you've got a block on attachments over a certain size. So I need to put it on a cloud service and you pick it up from that cloud service. So we need to make sure that we're putting the same security into cloud as we would anything else. And things like user behavior analytics. Let's look at this. The first one, the top left-hand side, turn on the phone, turn on the laptop. And at that point, we know, we IT people know where I am, what time it is, which device I'm using, which operating system. You know, we know all of that stuff. We know, oh, look, Nigel is using the same IP address he's used for the last few years. He's probably at home. Then at the bottom, what happens? You know, all of a sudden, Nigel turns his devices off and then seems to log in from a brand new device in a new country. Nigel uses an Android device from Beijing at 3 o'clock in the morning. Wow, stop. Unusual behavior pattern. He wasn't there 2 hours ago when he turned his devices off, and he hasn't been to Beijing in the last, I don't know, 10 years. So we can use user behavior patterns as people access cloud services and say, he tried to log into 365, he tried to log into Salesforce from a new device in a new country, unusual behavior pattern. Do the same sort of thing that banks do with credit cards. That's unusual purchase, turn him off. Let's make sure that we investigate and check what's going on, because in fact, he couldn't have got to Beijing from the UK, so something weird is going on. We can give you the power to make these decisions, and we can give you the power then to enforce your security. So what do you need to do about it? Well, I think it's unfair that security is an IT problem. It shouldn't be an IT problem, because actually we should be working with multiple departments to try to work out what rules do we want, what policies do we need. I'd even say, and I work for a vendor, don't buy a product until you've worked out what you want to do with it. So you can see here, bring people together from different teams, have discussions with them, decide what are the biggest risks in your organization. This particular slide, I've worked with some people and helped facilitate discussions. I've spent 2 hours with them preparing this slide and agreeing with them which was their biggest risk. For you, it might be infrastructure as a service. For someone else, it might be Teams. For someone else, it may be 365 or Salesforce. You need to decide what's the biggest threat to you. And then start mapping to regulations. PDPL, GDPR, PCI, Dubai International Finance Center, all have regulations. And actually, you can start mapping them to technology. This is what the regulation says. This is what we need to do in the cloud. Are there some technologies or some policies that we can set to help us? And you need to look at these as very specific requirements. Don't just ask a single question of, I don't know, is Azure safe? That's not the question. The question is, can this user in this department use Azure in this way and share information through Azure using this application with this other person? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. And we can help you with this, because I'm going to also share with you, I think it's about 15 pages now, of questions that typically we ask ourselves in workshops. And we can then work together to try to work out, well, what are the policies you need? And if you need an external facilitator to help with these discussions, let me know, because I'd be very happy to discuss with you and the rest of your internal teams. But I will demand something of you. I will demand that we use multiple people from multiple different departments, because really then we have these great broad discussions that can help you make sure that you're putting together all the security you need for the cloud. Going back to a little diagram of shared responsibility, you can see now on the left-hand side, I've put in some technologies that you need. Unfortunately, you need lots of technologies to try to make sure you're addressing every row. And there's a white paper that this comes from, which I can share with you as well. And you can share internally with the rest of your organization. But first, what you really need to know is what's going on. And again, McAfee can help you. We can give you a cloud risk report that says, these are the services in use in your organization. These are the risky ones. These are the systems that are being used that could be incorporated into your single sign-on, but probably are not. So there, I need to stop. I need to say that, you know, I didn't want to talk to you about all of our technology, but you can perhaps see through the flow that McAfee can help you deploy the cloud security that you want. And if you've got further questions, do come and talk to the rest of us and contact me. You can see my contact details there. I'll very happily share this presentation and all of the papers that I talked about. So with that, thank you very much. I hope that was interesting.
Sure, yes, Nigel, indeed, it was a very simple and also very attractive presentation, and of course you've got some engagement from the audience, so a lot of questions on the Q&A tab that we have received. So very quickly, just one question I would want to put it across to you, maybe if you can answer it quickly in maybe about 30 seconds or a minute. So here it goes. If a company is using, say, about 10 cloud services with a combination of infrastructure as a service and subscription as a service, what is McAfee's approach to simplifying this complexity in terms of managing these policies?
Yeah, well, the good news is that the CASB technology is there to try to give you a platform that's the same, whatever services you're using. So let me give you an example. We could run DLP that says any file that has more than, I don't know, 5 email addresses in is likely to be sensitive data. You know, it's maybe an employee list or it's a customer list. And we can say that should be tracked, that should be logged. Maybe we even say that shouldn't leave the organization. And then once you implement that, then that can be implemented across infrastructure as a service, across software as a service. We can set up rules that say, it's okay to share that file with internal people, but not external people. And the whole idea really of a CASB is to try to simplify this, because otherwise you've got to go into every single cloud service, and every single cloud service has a different way of setting up the management. The whole idea really of a CASB is to try to have one place that you set your policy for all your cloud services, whatever they might be.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much there, Nigel. Indeed, yeah, of course, very informative. Of course, a lot of questions that we've been receiving would be shared with you so that you could answer them at your.
Very happy to do that.
Yes, and of course to the audience and all the speakers and all the delegates, request you to do visit McAfee's launch. If you have any questions, we have representatives from McAfee who are seated there to help you, assist you with whatever information that you're looking for. And yes, McAfee is one of our official cloud security partner, so do feel free. So thank you there, Nigel.